Hello, my name is Rich Howard, owner of Architectural Builders Supply. In this video is to bring you a closer look at the ABH 0117 offset pivot set. The example of the pivot set I'm going to show you is in the 32D satin stainless finish. Okay. We're going to start with the top pivot first, and I'll show you all the constituent components involved. First of all, this is a handed pivot, so you'll need to know which handing that you want and order it correctly, even though the top pivot is not a handed item. The bottom pivot is. This is what the top pivot looks like. Okay. It's a two-piece design. Okay. This is the showing it to you here as a left-hand unit. So if you are, we'll do it this way. If you are on the pull side of the door, okay, this would be you on the pull side. It would swing out towards you like this. Okay. Top portion's got the pin generally installed already in it. And these parts are by all means identical. You know, you can remove that pin accessing it with the Allen wrench screws above. And we'll talk more about that in a moment along with the physical size of this. So that's the top portion, and that would be ABH's 0180 top pivot. Now the bottom pivot is also a two-piece situation where you've got the bottom arm that gets installed, and again this is a left hand, so you're on the pull side as the door would swing towards you this way. Door is going to occupy this space in here. Finished cap is already attached. I don't think there'd be any reason for you to remove that during the installation process. Okay, again the stainless steel. It's a large arm. This pivot set is rated for 300-pound doors. Countersinks on the bottom of it, so you know that that would be the bottom. Then your floor plate, seen here. Sorry. Shown to you here. That's what the assembly looks like. Okay. Screws are included. They're also stainless steel. Putting a magnet on it confirms that. All wood screws, all machine screws for both the top pivot and the bottom. Depending what you're going to be installing it to, a wood door, metal frame, metal door, metal frame, you know, etc. So there's a link below this video to the template, and this is really, you know, the most important portion of talking about this pivot. I've installed these many times. I've machined for doors for these many times, and looking at the template, you're going to see the link to the template in the item below this video is the same paperwork that's going to come with your material. Sorry. So looking at the first page, and that's the dimensional drawing of the pivot, it's the template. So you can see there that you've got an overall, talking only about the top pivot at this point, you can see that you've got an overall length of the top pivot of 4 1/4 inch, and I'm going to grab a portion of that and put a tape measure on it and show it to you, show you what I'm talking about. So we're looking at the upper right hand portion of the template, 4 1/4, okay. 1 1/16 would be the width of the plate. your thickness is given as 1/4 inch, right below it. Okay. And those dimensions are the same for the door portion as well. Looking at the bottom the bottom arm, the bottom assembly, shows it at 7 1/4 overall length. Okay, there you go. Looks a little shy on that, but it's because I'm not really measuring it from the tip here. It's, you know, per the drawing, it's at 7 1/4. The width is 7/8. Okay. Material thickness is 3/8 of an inch. So it's a heavy piece of steel is what this is. The bottom line is, with installing this material, you need to mortise the top of the door and the header, and then you need to mortise the bottom of the door simply to fit these components per the dimensions on the template, and more importantly, the dimensions as referenced from the pivoting axis. Okay, so what I mean by that is you're going to have measured from the edge of the door, the high side of the door, to the center of the pivoting axis, the center of that, it's going to be 3/4 inch. Okay. The dimension from the face of the door to the center of the pivoting axis is also 3/4 inch. So now you've got a reference point there. You can see your 1 7/8 dimension is going to tell you where the backside of your mortise is going to be for the bottom arm, looking at the upper left-hand corner of the template as well. Some dimensions given, just because I'm looking at it, some dimensions given on the radius for the door edge, the inside corner of the door edge. I've never radiused a door when I've done these pivots, and I don't. If you've got a bevel door, I don't think that's really going to be too much of an issue, because there's a slight break to the edge of a metal door. You can see where it's R3/16. I've never radiused like that, but edges on doors are always broken, so to speak, in terms of you know, the edge. You would indeed break that. So the most important dimension that is really not obvious or plainly laid out. Okay, once you know where you're installing, you know, mortising the bottom of the door for that arm. Although when I've done it, I've always started with the top, and those dimensions are, you know, you can see where they're referencing the edge of the preparation to the high side of the door. You'll want to keep that dimension in mind. You've got, you know, 3/4 inch as well. That needs to be the same. So when I've mortised for these, and it looks like they're giving you a 1/16 of an inch margin on the edge, looking at the upper right-hand corner of the pivot. When I've done these before, I've got my top pivot mortised into the header. If I'm doing a field installation, a field hanging this, I would install the top portion into the header. Okay, I'd get this installed. I would back this plug out and remove the pin. Okay, so just to, what I've done is I've removed this plug. I back this out, remove the plug. Once I get it mortised to the header, and I want to go back to the template for a moment. I don't think I've been very clear with that. You know, with a lot of these templates for pivots, they seem like there's a lot of dimensions thrown out there, and there are. But the bottom line is there's always a reference point to begin with. And first of all, it's going to be how far off of the edge of the door and how far back. So looking at the top pivot, you've got a dimension of 7/16 of an inch, and that's going to be measured from the edge here to the center line here. So then below it, they give you a dimension of 3/4 inch from the edge of the door to the center line here. So if you take the difference between the two, okay, 5/16 of an inch, you've got your now you've got your dimension from the edge of the door to where that preparation starts. Perfect. Okay. Then you know that you've got a dimension of 3/4 inch from the face of this, from the center line of your pivoting axis to the face of the door. That's important. But then it gives you a 2-inch dimension from the center line of this to the back side of the preparation. Okay, so now what you're dealing with is 1 1/4 inch left over. You've got the thickness of this at the width of this at inch and a 1/16, and that leaves you with 3/16 of an inch from the face of the door to where the preparation starts. Now you know where to start your mortise for the top pivot assembly. You're done with at that point. Now keep in mind that drawing is referencing the top of the door. So if you're going to mortise this to the header, keep in mind that if you're measuring off the jamb to allow the gap between the jamb and the edge of the door, a 1/16 or 1/8 of an inch, the drawing is clearly indicating it to be a 1/16 of an inch. I usually like a little bit more closer to, a little heavy on a 1/16, between a 1/16 and an 1/8, that kind of thing. 3/32 is a good dimension, so keep that in mind. Now once I get the pivot mortise to the header, I'll then drop a plumb bob down, all the way down, so I can get this floor portion positioned correctly. That's got to be perfectly plumb, otherwise your door is going to creep open or creep closed or just not work correctly. Also, you've got a margin between the jambs and your door and the header, and if you've not installed that plumb, you're going to see that just by looking at the margin. So you want to make sure you get that spot on, is the bottom line. The logic by which you mortise the bottom portion of the bottom of the door is simply the same in terms of where to start. So looking at the template, you've got that. And if you don't, reach out to me. I'll help you with it. The only other dimension that has to be calculated is how deep you mortise this to the bottom of the door. Lower right-hand area of page 1 of the template, you're going to see dimension A. Dimension A, door mortise, depth for arm. You can see that there is a reference that if you have a 1/4 inch threshold, they want you to mortise that depth 11/16 of an inch. And that if you have a 1/2 inch threshold height, you're going to mortise that to a depth of 7/16. So the higher the threshold, okay, the less deep or shallower you're going to mortise the arm into the bottom of the door, which will of course, give you more room underneath the door. On the left side of that drawing, you can see that there's another waypoint. If you were to mortise the depth of the arm 15/16 of an inch, that would give you a 3/16 dimension as measured from the bottom of the door to the top of the plate. That's how it's drawn. Bottom of the door to the top of the plate would be 3/16. So you can work out what sort of undercut that you want to be working on from that waypoint all the way to the 7/16 of an inch waypoint and determine how deep your arm has to be based on the undercut that you want to achieve. Keep in mind that they're referencing that 3/16 of an inch because you would not, you need to ignore this, so to speak, because your door doesn't technically need to swing over this part, so that's not going to be calculated in. So 3/16 will be the minimum, and that's how far, and if that's what you want to achieve, which is quite small, 15/16 is the dimension. Okay, you really can't go below 7/16 depth because the thickness of this arm is 3/8, and that would only allow an 1/8 of an inch. A 1/16 of an inch. You could flush it off, which would give you another 1/16, I suppose, and I've done that many times in the past, and it does work. This idea of how to mortise for offset pivots is common logic in terms of expressing it to other types of pivots. For instance, as I've said, this is a 3/4 offset pivot, which is measured from the face of the door to the center line of the pivoting axis. You can do 1.5" offset as well, and of course then center hung pivots are the opposite of offset. But the logic remains the same, and basically for these preparations, you're going to create a rectangular mortise in the edge of the door. The only thing you have to do is breach the face of the door, and you'll want to do that by hand. Well, at least do it any way you like. I like to do the breaching of the face of the door with a very sharp chisel, very easily done. Maybe scoring the face of the veneer of the door first. So I like to breach the face of the door very carefully, because you might be dealing with a veneer on a door that you don't want to damage the face of the door, and that's done by hand. But everything else, when I've done it, I would use a router. That's really the only way to fly doing this sort of stuff. And if you're going to do certainly more than one, I would take the hour or whatever time it would be to invest into making a template, so that you can get that clamped to the bottom of the door and just insert your router into your templating and make a professional result on it. I guess if you're doing one, you might do it by hand, but it's an awful lot of work to chisel that out by hand. I would not recommend it. I would use a router. You need a flat bottom preparation to get that installed correctly. There you go. ABH is a full-line manufacturer of pivots, amongst other things. Electromagnetic door holders, overhead stops, continuous hinges, a nifty, agile, smaller scale company, although I don't know how many employees I have. I could easily count 50, I think, when I go there. Just to the west of O'Hare Airport in Illinois. Great company, great quality customer service, extremely knowledgeable. Pretty quick with lead times. Everything is made to order, and always well worth the wait. Can do things other people find it a little harder to do. In general, like dealing with them. Specifically regarding the pivots, once you get everything machined, you can drive out that top pin, get your door, everything attached, place it on your bottom pivot plate, tip it forward, and drive your pin back down. Really, your installation is done at that point. And page 2 of the template really does call out the importance of having that plumb vertical axis of pivoting. It's utterly key to have that. In addition to the floor plate being level as well. Pivots are great because they are able to carry a significant amount of weight. Mother Earth is bearing the weight of the door, not the hinges or the frame, so to speak. Keep in mind that intermediate pivots are always going to be recommended on offset. Wood door manufacturers are going to have a problem with any sort of claim for warranty of warp if there are no intermediate pivots, so word to the wise, you might want to incorporate that from day one. People like pivots because it's a little more, to some people, aesthetically pleasing types of hardware, not just the regular old hinges, but they're also used because of their ability to hang heavier material. For instance, if you were going to hang a lead-lined door like you'd see in an x-ray room of a dental office or a clinic or a hospital, hinges are not the way to go with that, at least not traditional butt hinges. And pivots are very well suited to carry extreme weights of lead-lined doors and things of that nature. So that's it. If you have any questions on the ABH 0117 3/4 inch offset pivot or any other ABH pivot, how to machine it, how to prep it, how to hang it, please feel free to reach out to me. I enjoy pivots and I've worked on them. I've machined, I've sold, I've installed, I've done all of that stuff for many years, and think that they're really neat pieces of hardware. Or questions on any other line item from ABH whatsoever, please feel free to reach out to us. Thank you very much.